everything that you need, but I cannot turn back the years.
Shaken by what has happened, the killer could be still walking around or in the area.
Turn back the years. So we have to be strong, and I'm finding that hard. We have to move on, but no matter how hard I try, if your heart's in pieces, you look for the truth. And when I look deep down in...
Friends, today I have a sick, demented story of a mother who hated a child. Nicole Diar was a burn victim, and at age 4, Dyer's pajamas caught on fire. She suffered horrific burns that left permanent scarring over much of her body. She underwent 61 operations over the next 14 years, and as a result of this accident, Dyer received a structured settlement that provided her approximately $3,000 per month and other periodic lump sum payments. Now, during the first few months of 2003, Dyer and her 4-year-old son Jacob lived in an apartment. Rebecca Dyer, Nicole's sister, and Taylor Dyer, Rebecca's daughter, lived in the same building. On one occasion, during 2003, 14-year-old Luis Augusto babysat for Jacob and Taylor. Dyer and Rebecca asked Augusto to give Jacob some medicine because of his hyperactivity. The medicine was in a bottle that looked like it contained cough syrup, but Augusto did not read the label. After Dyer and Rebecca left for the evening, 2 other teenagers, Christopher Shreves and Rachel Weiss, came to the apartment. Augusto then gave Jacob a teaspoon of the medicine, and Jacob became sick and vomited. Shreves read the label and learned that the bottle contained Tylenol with codeine that had been prescribed for Taylor. Shreves told Dyer about the incident when she arrived home later that night, but Dyer said, "It's not a big deal. Jacob will be okay." During the summer of 2003, 15-year-old Destiny Faulkner babysat for Jacob. On 3 occasions, Dyer asked Faulkner to give Taylor's codeine to Jacob because it made him sleepy. Faulkner gave Jacob this medicine on 2 occasions. After trial, Sahar Sarkis, a pharmacist, testified that on May the 20th, 2003, he filled a prescription for acetaminophen with codeine, a Schedule 5 drug, for Taylor Dyer. I know I butchered that name. Possible side effects in taking this drug included upset stomach, vomiting, nausea, and drowsiness. On July the 1st, 2003, Dyer and Jacob moved into a rental home at 910 West 10th Street in Lorraine. Charles Hassler, the landlord, renovated the house before Dyer moved in. He installed a new smoke detector near the dining room and made sure that all the smoke detectors in the house worked and had batteries. On the morning of August 26, 2003, Dyer spoke to Michelle Gregory, Hassler's girlfriend. Dyer said that she had lost her house keys and needed replacements. At 2 p.m. on August 26, Hassler went to Dyer's house and gave her a replacement key. Dyer told Hassler that someone broke into her house and stole the money orders she used to pay her rent. Dyer said that she was going to change the locks to make sure that the house was safe. On August 26, Laroma Penn, Dyer's next-door neighbor, saw Dyer off and on for much of the day. Dyer mentioned that she wanted to change the locks because she suspected that John Walker, an acquaintance, had stolen her keys. Laroma volunteered to change the locks. Dyer parked her car in an alley across the street from her house. Before Laroma left the house, Dyer said that she was going to settle Jacob down for the night. Dyer said that she will call Laroma so they can get back together later that evening. So sometime later that evening, Laroma returned to Dyer's home. Jacob was asleep on the living room couch. According to Laroma, Jacob slept mostly on the couch or chaise lounge in the living room. Dyer and Laroma spent the remainder of that evening sitting on the porch, drinking Kahlua and banana rum. And then at 1 a.m. Laroma went home. Before departing, Laroma saw Dyer lie down on the couch with Jacob. Jacob was wearing one of Dyer's t-shirts. Laroma made sure the front door was locked when she left. Around 8 a.m. on August 27th, Laroma called Dyer because they had made plans to run some errands together that morning. However, Dyer did not answer the phone. Then about an hour later, Laroma was in her basement when she heard Nicole Diar shrieking. Laroma went outside and saw Dyer standing on her front porch while smoke was coming out of the front door. Dyer was screaming that her house was on fire and she could not find Jacob. Laroma called 911. Edgar Penn, Laroma's husband, was awakened by Dyer's screams. Edgar put on some clothes, went outside and saw that Dyer's house was on fire. Edgar, he asked Dyer, "Where is Jacob?" And she said, "He was in the front chair of the living room." She also said that Jacob could be upstairs or in the kitchen. Edgar could not enter the front door because of the smoke. Edgar then ran to the back of the house. However, he could not enter the house because the smoke was too intense. At 9:06 a.m., Lorraine firemen were dispatched to Dyer's house. Lieutenant Mark Nunez, one of the first firemen at the scene, observed heavy smoke and fire around the entire house. Nunez met Dyer at the front of the house. Dyer said, "My baby's inside." Nunez and the two firemen then entered the front door and saw that the fire was concentrated on the west side of the house where the first floor bedroom was located. Fireman Steve Griffith arrived shortly after Nunez. Griffith talked to Dyer in front of the house and asked where she had last seen her child. Dyer said, "Downstairs in the back." As Griffith was about to enter the house, Dyer pulled on Griffith's arm and told him, "No, I mean he's upstairs. He's upstairs." Griffith then entered the house, walked through the heavy fire and smoke in the dining room area, and went upstairs looking for Jacob. Griffith thoroughly searched the second floor for Jacob. Griffith was trapped in the upstairs hallway and unable to return downstairs because the fire was coming up the stairwell. Despite the smoke, Griffith eventually found a window and jumped to the ground, injuring himself. Fireman John May talked to Dyer outside her house during this incident. May noticed that Dyer's skin and her clothing did not contain any soot and did not smell of gasoline. May testified that he would have expected Dyer to have been covered in soot if she had spent any amount of time in her smoke-filled house. Around 10 a.m., the fire was extinguished. Lieutenant James Davis, a Lorraine fireman, entered the house to look for hot spots and burning embers. He smelled gasoline at the front door. Davis proceeded through the house and noticed an obvious burn pattern on the floor that went into the bedroom. Davis then entered the first floor bedroom and found Jacob's severely burned body on the bed. Shortly after Jacob's body was found, Dyer and her mother, Marilyn Dyer, were escorted to a nearby ambulance police. A paramedic examined Dyer and determined that her lungs were clear. She had no problems breathing and everything appeared normal. Dyer was then informed that her son's life was taken in the fire. Now, Lorraine detective David Garcia, who was present in the ambulance, asked Dyer what happened. Dyer said she woke up to black smoke everywhere and tried to find her son, but was overcome by smoke and left the house. Dyer provided no further information. However, she asked Garcia whether her son had been burned beyond recognition. Garcia replied that he did not know. Dyer and her mother then left the area. Around 8 p.m. on August 27th, Garcia spoke to Dyer at her parents' home. In a taped interview, Dyer stated that she was home on the night before the fire. Dyer said she had spent some time with Laroma, but she had no other visitors that evening. Dyer said that she had changed her door locks earlier in the day because she had lost her keys. Dyer told Garcia that Jacob had gone to sleep on the Chase lounge in the living room around 11 p.m. and she went to sleep on the living room couch around 1:30 a.m. Dyer confirmed that the doors in her house were locked. At 4:30 a.m., Jacob woke up and Dyer gave him some juice. Dyer said that she woke up between 8:50 and 9 a.m. and saw black smoke everywhere. Dyer said she went into the dining room looking for Jacob but left the house because she could not breathe. She also went back into the house a second time to find Jacob but was unsuccessful. And then she confirmed she does not know what caused the fire. Dyer said she was wearing a beige top and denim skirt that morning. Dyer was still wearing this clothing during the interview and these clothes were not covered in soot. On August 27th, Lee Bethune, a fire investigator with the Ohio Fire Marshal's office, examined the house. Upon entering the front door, he noticed a very strong smell of gasoline in the area of the living room couch and the rug in front of the couch. He stepped on the rug in front of the couch and liquid oozed from it. Bethune also noticed that the living area suffered less fire damage than the dining room. Bethune detected blistering coming up the table legs and chairs in the dining room and irregular burn patterns at floor level in that room. Such burn patterns showed that the fire had occurred at floor level and that an accelerant had been used to spread the fire from the dining room into the bedroom where Jacob's body was found. The bedroom was severely damaged by the fire. These burn patterns were consistent with the flammable liquid having been poured around the bed. Bethune concluded that the fire was started by the direct act of a human hand and flame device with an accelerant. Surely Nicole did not burn her son, did she? He identified gasoline as the accelerant because samples collected from the living room carpet, the rug, and the seat cushion tested positive for the presence of gasoline. Bethune also examined the downstairs bathroom. He testified that the bathtub was about 3/4 full of water and that children's toys were in the bathtub. Bethune stated that none of the water in the bathtub came from the fire hoses. On August 29th, Genevieve Beers, a fire investigator hired by the landlord insurance company, conducted an investigation into the cause of the fire. Her observations were essentially the same as Bethune's. She concluded that the fire was set. It was not accidental. On August 29th, Ralph Dolance, an electrical expert, examined the wiring, the appliances, the hot water tank, and the furnace of the house. He found that the wiring system in the house had been updated and was fairly new. Dolance determined that there was no electrical failure or malfunction that might have caused or contributed to the fire. Dr. Paul Mattis, the Lorain County coroner, conducted the autopsy on Jacob and said that Jacob's manner of dress was very peculiar and somewhat alarming. Despite the warm weather, Jacob was dressed in long pants, a t-shirt, and a hooded sweatshirt. The hood had been pulled down over his face. The doctor determined that Jacob's cause of death was homicidal violence. In reaching this conclusion, Dr. Mattis found that Jacob did not die as a result of the fire. His mouth and nasal passages were clear of any soot, foam, or debris, and his larynx, trachea, and lungs were clear of soot and debris. Dr. Mattis was unable to determine whether Jacob had died from a head injury because there was near total destruction of the skull itself. Subsequently, Krista Randaran, an examiner at the State Fire Marshal Forensic Lab, determined that the velvet hood and underwear worn by Jacob and the mattress pad tested positive for the presence of gasoline. It was on August the 30th where Jacob's funeral was held. On the day before the funeral, Chad Dyer, Nicole's brother, drove a limousine through the drive-through lane at Junction Beverage. Chad ordered a 12-pack of Diet Pepsi. The clerk asked whether he needed anything else. Dyer then stuck the top half of her body out the limousine window and said, "I want the liquor. Don't forget the liquor." In the evening after the funeral, Dyer and her brothers and sisters went to Jack and Diane's lounge. Witnesses saw Dyer drinking, singing karaoke on the stage, and line dancing. On the same evening, Dustin Otero, an acquaintance of Nicole, saw Dyer and others at a local bowling alley. Otero said that Dyer was bowling, drinking, and having a good time. Now, shortly after the fire, Alicia Huff, who was a friend of Nicole, started to ask Nicole about the fire and what had happened. And Nicole mentioned several theories. She thought that two crackheads might have started the fire. She also surmised that Laroma might have put drugs into her drink on the night before the fire. During the week after Jacob's death, Huff told Dyer that she wanted to hold a candlelight vigil and hand out flyers to help find the killer. But Dyer did not want to do this. Over the next 2 to 3 weeks, Huff tried to talk to Dyer, but Dyer refused to speak to her. Huff then sent a text message to Dyer saying, "I know." 2 minutes after receiving the text message, Dyer contacted Huff and said she wanted to socialize with her. On September 3, 2003, Detective Garcia and Sergeant Albert Rivera conducted a videotaped interview of Dyer. She said her house had been broken into about a week before the fire. Dyer learned about that break-in after Jacob woke her up and she found the front door open and the desk drawers pulled out. Dyer also stated that she had lost her keys 2 nights before the fire. Dyer also said she made sure her windows were locked. According to Dyer, the attic window in the front of the house and the window holding the air conditioner were the only windows that were not locked. And then at 4:30 a.m., Jacob woke up Dyer and asked for some juice. Dyer gave Jacob some juice and he went back to sleep on the chase lounge with his dog. Dyer then went back to sleep on the couch. She said that between 8:50 and 9 a.m. she woke up and saw black smoke everywhere. Dyer screamed for Jacob and he didn't answer. She went outside and then someone called 911. Dyer then went back inside the house to look for Jacob. She attempted to go into the dining room but she was coughing and choking and was unable to advance any further. Subsequently, the fire department arrived. Dyer remembers that somebody yelled for the firefighters to check upstairs for Jacob. However, she said that Jacob was never upstairs. Dyer believed the fire was accidental. She speculated that Jacob might have gone into the bedroom looking for his dog after waking up and finding that his dog was no longer in the living room. She also thought that Jacob might have gotten hold of her lighter and started the fire. But Dyer said there was no gasoline in the house that Jacob might have used to start the fire. As the interview progressed, the investigators confronted Dyer by telling her that scientific and medical evidence showed that Jacob did not die in the fire. Dyer said, "No way, that's not true. I did not harm my son." When informed that Jacob's body was found wearing a hooded sweatshirt, Dyer stated that she was unaware of that. Dyer said that Jacob was not wearing a hooded sweatshirt that evening and she did not believe that Jacob even had one. Investigators suggested that Jacob might have died in an accident in the bathroom. Dyer said this did not happen and denied starting the fire to cover up his death. During the investigation, police examined the front and rear attic windows as possible entry points into the house. However, these windows could not be reached without a ladder. Police recovered the new front doorknob and back door locks that were on the doors at the time of the fire. On October 2, 2003, Chad and Edward Dyer, Nicole's father, gave police 3 keys and they opened the front and back door locks. Investigators checked the hardware store where the locks were purchased and found that the locks were sold with 4 keys. On August 27, 2003, Dennis Johnson, the senior chaplain for the Lorraine Police Department, was with Dyer in the ambulance during the fire. Johnson said that Dyer was sobbing and upset. Kelly Pitts, a registered nurse at Amherst Hospital, saw Dyer in the emergency room after the fire. Dyer's chief complaint was smoke inhalation and she was treated with oxygen. Pitts noticed a faint odor of smoke on Dyer's person and clothing. Dyer had dry and cracked lips and looked dehydrated. Marilyn Dyer testified that Dyer had been unsure that she could ever get pregnant because she had taken steroids during her burn treatments. Jacob was a healthy, happy baby and Dyer loved him. After learning about the fire, Marilyn went to Dyer's house. Marilyn asked Dyer where Jacob was and Dyer said, "I don't know." Marilyn then drove Dyer to Marilyn's house and Dyer went to bed. Dyer appeared to be in shock. At the urging of police officers, Marilyn later took her to the hospital to be examined for fire-related injuries. Marilyn said that Dyer did have some soot under her nose, but generally speaking, she was not covered in soot. Marilyn testified that during the funeral, Dyer was not screaming and crying, but she's never really shown much emotion and was on medication. Linda Powers, a medical social worker who runs burn camps, testified that burn camps provide young burn survivors the opportunity to enjoy horseback riding, swimming and other camp activities. Dyer was a regular participant in these burn activities when she was 18 or 19 years old. She also attended these burn camps after Jacob was born. Guy Morton, the pastor at Jacob's funeral, testified that Dyer's behavior was typical of someone who had lost a loved one. During the funeral, Dyer seemed like she was carrying the whole world on her shoulders. He said, during counseling sessions after the funeral, Dyer broke down and wept. Daryl Eberhardt, a family friend, and Nikisha Ortich, who had lived with Dyer on separate occasions, testified that Dyer had a warm, loving relationship with Jacob. Both of them observed Dyer grieving and crying during the funeral service. Stacy Mihalich, who had once lived in the same apartment complex as Dyer, testified that Dyer and Jacob did things together, and Jacob always had new toys and clothes. So in April of 2004, Nicole Diar was indicted on aggravated murder and other charges. The court then approved an amended indictment in September 2005. Dyer pled not guilty to all these charges, but during the trial, she was found guilty and sentenced to death. But after an appeal, on June 3, 2010, she was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The theory goes that she suffocated her child before she set her house on fire. There wasn't much soot or any burn marks on her. The police were very suspicious from the beginning. The exact cause of death was never really determined because the boy's body was so badly burnt they couldn't really figure it out. So, as I have requested the police interviews, hopefully when I get them, we can watch them together and we can see, alright, let's have a look at her body language, let's see what actually happened. Either way, if she did do this, then what a silly cow. Comment, tell me what you think.